profit and loss
I
statement.
believe you.
We're talking a lot.
So, I'm just not...
Dina, I bet that includes our donations.
What?
Our donation to Friendship Place, rent subsidy, when you and I talked yesterday.
Yeah, but I do not remember that was...
That high.
I think it was,
I think it's less. Do you think it's that?
yes,
Susan?
I think it's, no, I think it's. I
Well,
think it's
this
less.
164,000 included 12,000 that went for REM subsidies. This 196 included nearly 30,000 for REM subsidies. So if you took that out, that would bring it down to 160.
I believe that we're more between 145 and 160,000, and I brought numbers, but not the approved.
Well,
I have the approved budget.
Well, the approved budget is not what I use.
Okay.
When I say annual budget, I'm using the actual expenses and the actual income in each year, regardless of what the budget was. And these are the figures that come off of Martha's P&Ls. And
Okay.
so anyway, the point I was trying to make is that we have done a very good job of increasing contributions, and we seem to have developed better techniques, and people like Steve Schwat with the arm twisting capacities have helped a lot. The area that I think I'd like to point out that I think we could really focus on is grants. Because if you look at our grants, what we got, they're all over the map. We had a couple years, 2 years ago, where we almost had $50,000 in outside grants. We dropped the following year down to 25,000. And so this is, I think,
Does that reflect Fannie Mae?
no, it doesn't, other than Fannie Mae. So I think that's an area where in our focus we need to look at doing a better job, particularly because we no longer have the Fannie Mae program. You'll notice that began in 2002. We had 18,000 from that program the first year, and it went up to 49, 42, 58.6. Then in the 30s, last year was the first year without Fannie Mae involvement. We were down to 16. I think we did a better job this past fall. But that's not reflected here because that's part of the 2014 year. But I only point that out that program was very important, and at a point was like a third or more of our total income. And it helped actually our expansion. But now that we no longer have that, that's why we need to focus, I think, more on grants.
I think we've
always had a steady increase in rents from our tenants because that reflects the fact that we've increased the number of tenants. It also reflects that we made a change and that those who are better off are now paying, instead of the minimum $200 a month, they're paying 25% of whatever their income is. So those whose income has gone up are paying a higher rent. Okay, on the expense side, I would just say that our administrative costs have also been very erratic. They used to be fairly minimal, but where they've been going up, some of that reflects payments to Martha for her services, but there must have been other items there, one-time costs like a computer or two or something like that. I can't account for it, but it's something that we need to look at. But
Does that include our payments to Friendship Place?
The Bloomerang database.
Yeah, okay. So we have tended to argue as a fundraising strategy that we have low administrative costs. I think that still is true, but it's not in the 2 to 3% range it once was. It's more, I mean, it's 5% or more than.
It's still incredibly low.
Yes, it is, and that is because, once again, we do not have we don't pay any salaries. Yes.
David, that 12%, if that's for Bloomerang, isn't that really a capital
That's not a
expense?
percent. I don't, all I
That's not a
know,
percentage.
It's 12,000.
I can't,
That's a
Of
thousand.
dollars.
look, I have not
The
been,
number of, it's a number.
I've not been the treasurer or an officer of the organization for a number of years, so I don't know the details. I'm only using, these are figures that come off our annual financial statements.
Right, but for purposes of our thinking about whether or not we'd be interested in a contract part-time administrator, our administrative expenses are not that high now. That reflects the expense of buying a piece of equipment,
A piece of software, yes.
a piece of software.
And I would also say, so far, I believe that the Bloomerang costs and what we're exploring right now in expanding website software have been supported by technology grants. So they haven't come, technology grants,
Okay.
so they haven't come out of operating funds.
Anyway, those are things that I can't really answer. Yeah.
Where does the payment to Friendship Place for each client?
That would come out of not administrative costs. That would go into the cost of each unit.
Okay.
If you look at our P&L statements, we have it broken down by each housing unit, and one of the costs of each unit is the payment to Friendship Place. Okay, shifting from money and program, I just wanted to talk briefly of how we organized as a group. We did incorporate in '87. So I call 1988 through 95 sort of our startup single project days. And we had a very large board. Many people never came to meetings. Many were inactive. And we had an oversight committee for the group home. I was surprised to hear from you that even in the early days, Elaine, we had individual liaisons. I remember we had a committee that would meet with the residents once a month and so forth. But anyway, that's how we were operating. Then in '96, when we bought our first apartment, we started working operationally with Friendship Place. We did a bylaws revision that year. We reduced the size of the board so that we would have only people who were active coming. And the result, we had realistic quorum requirements when we had to have a quorum. And we established a non-voting honorary board for people who we knew would probably not come to meetings, but we wanted to recognize in some way, but they no longer were voting and part of the board. Then '97 to 2007, those are the years I was president. And essentially, I was working as a volunteer part-time executive director. And the board made policy decisions, but other than having liaisons for individual people, the only other member of the board who I think had a significant role was Sheila, who has always been a vice president. And she worked closely with me on anything involving residents, either selecting new ones or tending to problems. But we had a very simple structure. And then a year before I left as president and announced that I more or less wanted to retire again, the board got together and created a new model that I think has worked pretty well. All the things I did were divided up to different people, what I call portfolio managers. One who handles property, one who handles residents, one dealing with grants, one with fundraising, one with database website issues. And we created a co-presidency and ultimately made those co-presidents not coterminous, but overlapping, so that two would serve together for a year, one would leave, then we would bring on somebody new. So the question I think we have, among others today, is with this current model, that seems to be working pretty well, how can we strengthen the organization?
David, how many more pages do you have?
I have, if you want, I think I have 2 or 3. but if you want me to stop...
Not so much stop, can we accelerate? I mean, can we
Okay.
get through it a little quicker? 'Cause-
Okay, I created this just to tell you a little bit about our condos, how we finance them, what are the advantages or disadvantages. They essentially have always been on short mortgages of maximum of 15 years. We've purchased them with almost with no money of our own, at least the first 4 were that way. But we did get outside grants and loans. Only the last 2 did we have to put in significant amount of our own funds. And there's been some suggestion that we use the Burton Fund as the equity for another purchase. The advantage, obviously, of owning is that you have a fixed monthly mortgage payment, so you don't have an increase. The condo fees do go up, but not significantly enough. And they do ultimately appreciate in value. We don't have property taxes. The major problem is that you're responsible for the unit. So if something goes wrong, you have to buy new equipment, make the repairs. And here are the units we've purchased. Notice the initial 4 ranged from $43,000 to $57,000.